got one young lady at Ole Miss, I believe, who might be off Tennessee's list. And why, Caleb?
Yes, I am going to 180 my talk on Yolett McPhee-McCuin today, who I really liked at Ole Miss, but it speaks to your character when you make certain hires as assistants and staff members. And she made a hire yesterday that is the most disturbing hire I've seen. It's a guy named Quentin Hillsman, who was the head coach at Syracuse from 2006 to 2021. Felicia Leggett-Jack, actually, who we just mentioned, has now replaced Quentin Hillsman at Syracuse. One, just on now this isn't as big of a deal because it could be a misunderstanding. I could believe that. But in 2011, he owed $14,000 in back taxes to the state of New York when he was a coach. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Women's basketball salaries aren't like men's. Maybe he was bad with his money for a minute and he had to figure something out. Whatever. $14,000 is a lot of money, though, isn't it, Dave?
It's a good amount of money, but the IRS deals in bigger numbers as well.
That's true. So there was that. In 2011, former Syracuse player Linnea Lampkins accused him of inappropriate behavior, and her father filed a Title IX sexual harassment complaint against the university. Lampkins originally reported the incident in 2010, stating he inappropriately touched and texted her. Now, independent counsel investigated the accusation, found no evidence of harassment. In 2021, The Athletic published an article that Hillsman would often use inappropriate language, regularly threaten players, make players, quote, this is the weird part, uncomfortable by kissing them on the forehead.
Whenever you have to say that, this is the weird part. Then the rest of it's been pretty darn weird too.
Exactly. Uncomfortable by kissing them on the forehead. Hired an assistant who had been accused of sexual harassment that made both players and managers uncomfortable and refused to give them water breaks after periods of running, which, okay, that's like some old school Bear Bryant coaching. And
this is the person that Caleb wanted Tennessee to hire yesterday. I'm just telling you.
I stand corrected. And
okay,
an external investigation found that Syracuse mishandled concerning behavior and complaints, and a number of players and managers described an unhealthy environment and culture. That's according to the Daily Orange. And so that brings back the original harassment claim where it was found there was no evidence. Well, how objective was that independent counsel? And the Syracuse athletic director in 2021 announced that he had resigned. Well, he had resigned from the position, but Syracuse is acknowledging that they maybe did not handle this right. This is who she hired as an assistant on her staff. And I was actually really big on her as a rising star in the women's game. Tennessee settled a Title IX lawsuit a few years ago.
You just cursed her.
I didn't curse her. I didn't make the decision. She made the decision to hire this guy. After all of this, she made the decision to hire this guy.
So when you say the best coaching candidate, you're talking about realistic candidate, because it would be Mulkey or Don Staley, right?
Yes, it would be Mulkey or Don Staley. I mean, yeah, or even or Gino Auriemma if you want to go there then, but like you're not getting any of them.
Right. But here's how different Tennessee is now and where they are and where their football program was, because the drop down is to Lindsay Gottlieb, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the drop down, and I think she's gettable. So your drop down previously was a guy named Derek Dooley who had a losing record at La Tech. I mean, this is the one you've got to get right, because your next hire, if this doesn't go right, if they hire somebody that's a bust in 5 years, then your next drop down is going to be a lot lower than somebody who is currently one of the hottest young coaches in women's college basketball. You're not going to get the same option that you got. This is your last good option.
We don't just mean hottest in one way.
Oh, no. I don't mean, but Warlick was a transition because she was the assistant. She was the right-hand woman. Harper was your first decision, which was a bad decision, wasn't ready. This is your decision. I mean, I can't overstate this. This is the decision to make sure that Tennessee is not just relevant, but championship level relevant. And there are about 10 to 14 programs that are at that level. Tennessee needs to get back into that. And if they make a bad hire here, I don't know when they, if ever, get back into it. That's heartbreaking to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, it always comes out of nowhere when you get back into it. How many string of bad hires did Tennessee have in football before they got back into it with Josh Heupel? I mean, it happens overnight.
Yeah.
And You know, a lot of times you don't know where the success is going to come from. That's why, look, I'll say this with Danny White because I covered the Josh Heupel hiring. Guys, Danny White could have somebody on his radar that none of us are knowing about. I'm going to just give you a quick story, Dave, on Danny White's first primary hire was when he was at Buffalo, and it was a women's basketball hire. He hired Felicia Leggett-Jack. Now, I want you to know this, Dave. Felicia Leggett-Jack had just been fired by Indiana for going 14-16, 9-20, and then 6-24. That's usually that you're never getting a job after that, right?
No, you're not going to go get somebody that's 14-16 typically.
And 9-24 or 6-24 was her last year. Danny White hired her. She turned Buffalo into a preeminent MAC NCAA tournament team, and now she's at Syracuse doing incredibly well. Only Danny White saw how she could be good.
Okay, but let me try to pin you down a little bit here. What did he see?
I have done my thorough research on Felicia Leggett-Jack. I don't know what went wrong at Indiana and what went right at Buffalo and Syracuse. I don't know how Danny White knew about it and nobody else did. There's some explanation that goes beyond her coaching failures at Indiana, and I don't know. But Danny White sees things nobody else sees when he makes these hires. And he hires from – and one of the things he also understands very well, Danny White knows when a hire is a good fit for a school. So Scott Frost getting fired in Nebraska, you might say it looks bad on Danny White since Danny White found Scott Frost at UCF. Well, Scott Frost's system, Dave, as you know, is much better in Florida where you can get the athletes than it is in Nebraska.
Yeah.
Like,
but just because of numbers, just like sales. Just
because of numbers.
If you have 100 people in the pipeline at Florida and you just need to get one to be that, say, Calvin Johnson type when Georgia Tech was running the triple option, you need one difference maker. He could play running back or whatever, or not to get sideline on a receiver, but to get that one difference maker, you've got 100 people in the pipeline in the general area of UCF. You've got 10 people in the pipeline in Nebraska.
Exactly. And that's why Danny White understood. I think he hired Scott Frost because he knew Scott Frost was a fit for the system. He hired Josh Heupel at Tennessee in large part because also he hired Josh Heupel at UCF. His understanding was these tempo-based offenses are perfect in Florida where you can get the athletes. And he knew that it fits at Tennessee because Tennessee, with the NIL and the region and everything like that, can get the athletes too. Danny White knows how to hire. Half of hiring, and you know this, Dave, is hiring the coach who actually is a good fit for the school they're at. And I think Danny White understands that incredibly well. And so if anybody, Danny White might find a hire, guys, out of the blue that we've never heard of, and everybody on Monday will be criticizing the hire because they felt so underwhelmed because he does that. And then 2 years from now, everybody's going to say, I can't believe this amazing hire he made. That's exactly what happened with Josh Heupel. Remember how angry Tennessee fans were at the Josh Heupel hire, Dave, a few years ago? And
yes and no. I try to tune so much of that out. Now, there is one lady that I think we're ruling out of potential Tennessee candidate. I want to tell you why, because Caleb was smart enough to find this. It's brought to you by the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED. That's HOOKED for 10% off.